Good evening, everyone, and I'd like to welcome you and call to order our Lucan Biddulph Council meeting for Tuesday, February the 21st. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Okay, well, it's hard to believe that we're just about at the end of February. February is a short month, but it is a meaningful one. We recognize this month as Black History Month, and this year the theme is Ours to Tell. The theme represents not only an opportunity to engage in open dialogue, but also allows for a commitment to learning more about the stories that Black communities in Canada have to tell about their histories, successes, sacrifices, and of course, their triumphs. Lucan Biddulph has a strong and significant Black history, one that we are all familiar with. And I do hope that you take, if you haven't already, the opportunity to participate, engage, and commit during one of the many events, not only in Lucan Biddulph, but in Middlesex this month, celebrating Black History Month. February is also Heart Month. Did you know that Canadians have at least one risk factor of heart disease or stroke? It's important that we understand the warning signs of these conditions. Recognizing the signs and responding immediately significantly increases the chances of survival and recovery. Our cardiovascular health is heavily influenced by our physical and social environment. Our lifestyle choices have a major impact on the overall health of our hearts. Make changes to your lifestyle where appropriate. The Heart and Stroke Foundation raises awareness around the importance of cardiovascular health. Their website and local office offer resources to support you as you choose to treat your heart with kindness. We do not have a closed session tonight, and no public meetings, but we do have a delegation and we are being joined via Zoom. And I think Lisa is just bringing Simon in. So, Simon is in the waiting, or I guess he's joined us. He's always turning his camera on. There he is. So Simon McLinden from Canoe Procurement Group is the Client Relations Manager. And I'm pleased to welcome you to Lucan Biddulph this evening. We're anxious to see your presentation and learn more about what Canoe can do for us. And at this time, I'd like to welcome you and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Council, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. I would firstly quickly like to apologize, as I would love to have been there in person, but my wife is having a baby on Thursday, so it might have been pushing it a little bit for time-wise. So please accept my regrets for not being there in person, but the joys of 2023 is we can do this online. So I have a copy of my presentation in front of me. I can't see it on my screen there for you folks, so if you just bear with me 2 seconds. Okay, can everyone see my presentation on the screen?
No, we can't, but we've got it. Like we have it our own, but for those watching, they can't see it. So
okay, I can share my screen if you like.
Okay, so yeah, if you want to share your screen, that would be great.
Okay, give me 2 seconds. Everybody see that okay?
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So again, thank you very much. Quick background on myself. My name is Simon McLinden. I am the Client Relations Manager for Canoe Procurement for Ontario. I've been with the organization since January of last year, and previous to that, I was working in municipal and First Nations economic development, so space I'm fairly familiar with. And today I'm going to give you a bit of a quick high-level overview of what Canoe is and how we operate, and then at the end, I'll turn it over to you nice folks for any questions. And if you have anything in the meantime, feel free to stop me as we go. So who is Canoe? Canoe is Canada's largest not-for-profit group buying organization. We partner with municipal associations across the country. We've been in operation in Ontario since 2019, came out of the blocks very fast, and then there was a pandemic that kind of interrupted that progress for a little while, but nonetheless, we're back and full up to speed there. We started in 1936. It was based in Alberta, and it was a simple notion of a group of municipalities pooling together to utilize their resources to get a discount on rat poison, of all things. And then as we move into, the 21st century and well into it, that list of offerings has greatly expanded. We have 5,000 members roughly across the country. We only deal in the MASH sector. So as a point of reference for Canoe, we only work with municipalities, which is probably 90 to 95% of our business. We can also operate with school districts, regional districts, post-secondary education, hospitals, and individual not-for-profits, but the bulk of our business and the bulk of our organization is focused on the municipal sector. And we are Sourcewell's partner in Canada. So I'll touch on that a little bit later, but Sourcewell is the largest not-for-profit buying group in the US, which I think by definition makes them the largest not-for-profit in the world for group procurement. And we have a partnership with them where we can piggyback their contracts into Canada, and we turn those offerings over to our membership. So that's what that relationship looks like. Here's a little map of our coverage. As you can see, we partner with a municipal association everywhere in the country, with the exception of the Yukon, because they do not have one currently, and the province of Quebec, but they have different legislation in Quebec that unfortunately prevents us from doing business. But we are working on that as well. In Ontario, we partner with LAS, which is an organization I'm sure most of you are familiar with. They're the business services division of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And we've started that relationship since 2019. What that looks like is it's kind of a circular economy is probably the best way to sum that up. So we, if someone makes a purchase through the program, for example, let's say for a hypothetical number, it's $100,000. There's an administration fee as a not-for-profit for us to keep the lights on, and we actually split that administration fee with LAS. So anytime someone makes a purchase through our program, half of it goes towards Canoe to, keep our accountants employed and pay for myself and the team and investing in new programming, and the other half actually goes back to LAS for them to reinvest in all those important things for municipalities like advocacy and education and new programs for them. So that's what that relationship looks like. How do an organization like us help? So we mostly exist for two reasons. The first is to save you time, which I would argue is a much more important thing. And the other is to save you money. So in the traditional world of municipal procurement, or any public sector procurement for that matter, when you are required by the CFTA to go to tender for a competitive and open competitive bid for the best interests of the taxpayer, we do that portion on your behalf. So the average tender for something like a piece of heavy equipment, especially for a smaller municipality, you're looking at somewhere the administration range of, between 50 and 200 hours, depending on what the product is. We do that heavy administration lifting part for you, for our membership. The other thing is and from the money saving standpoint, is when you go to tender for something, you are getting a price from that vendor or from the vendors who bid on it, based on access to one municipality, in this case, the piece of business for Lucan. Now, if we look at the Canoe method or the Canoe methodology, when we go to tender, the vendors are responding on access to our entire membership across, well, if you factor in Sourcewell, it's a total of about 55,000 members. But in Canada alone, it's, they're pricing themselves aggressively on access to that 5,000 members that we have. From an additional benefits standpoint, to kind of hurry through things in the interest of time, we have a wide variety of suppliers. I think at this point we're at 297, so almost 300 suppliers, from every category, from boxes of paper to fire trucks, snow plows, and Zambonis, and everything in between. We are kind of a full service agency. To put that in perspective from a vendor standpoint, we don't deal in human capital so much, because human capital is quite hard to tender from insurance purposes and things to that effect. I always use the example of an arena. So if you're retrofitting or building a new arena in a municipality, through Canoe, you can get the boards, the Zamboni, the ice refrigeration unit, the glass, the rubber mats, the paint, the security cameras, the IT equipment for the staff that work there. What we can't provide, unfortunately, is the architect to tell you how to build it, or the people to play hockey, or the guy to drive the Zamboni. We can't do the human part, but most of everything else that goes inside that building, short of constructing the building itself, we can generally find an option for. So that's kind of a good example of what the Canoe method looks like. From a local distribution standpoint, we always get questions about, well, this might factor out local distributors. That's a really great point, and it is a good question. If you were to purchase something through our program and there is a local vendor who can deliver it, whether they be a distributor of equipment, whether they be a local dealership from a leasing perspective, from rentals, anything like that, it's always going to go through the most local option for your municipality. So using a real world example, if you have a national Michelin tire account contract through Canoe or with one of our other tire suppliers, and you have a local mechanic shop that has access to utilize that national account, which 99% of them do, you can still purchase your tires through that local business. You can still get your service done through that local business, and it will continue to run through there as best as we can. Our role is we offer the member support through the purchase. So if you're looking at something big and complex like a fire truck, you can pick up the phone and call me. I'm based in Ontario. I only work with Ontario municipalities, and we work with the fire department and go through the specs and farm that spec out to the vendors in our program that you would choose to use. And then you can choose to execute on that quote, or you can choose not to. The joy of Canoe and being a not-for-profit that's owned by municipalities is we are an as-you-need-it service. So we don't cost anything to use. We don't have any minimum purchasing requirements. You can spend $10 a month with us, or you can spend 10 million. Then we have every type of municipality and organization that does both of those numbers. So it's one of those things where we really kind of cover a broad scope. The real value is in the day-to-day stuff. So things like tires, office supplies, culverts, some of these things that municipalities go out for tender for every year, when there's really a solution out there that we can kind of shave some of that administrative time, give you access to that cost benefit, and move ahead from there. Gives you the opportunity as well to go out and you can source multiple quotes from our vendors and not be in any breach of compliance. So, you could go out to 3 of our heavy equipment manufacturers if you were in the market for, say, a grader or a backhoe or a tractor, something to that effect, something we do a lot of. You could go out to all 3 of them, receive quotes, and execute on the one that best suits the municipality, whether that be cost, if that's your internal procurement policy, whether it be time of delivery, which in today's world, and we'll talk about that very briefly on the supply chain element, I'm sure your municipality, as every other municipality in Ontario and across the country, is feeling the squeeze a little bit as far as pricing goes, and as far as even getting responses to traditional tenders is a real problem. I did a meeting not so long ago with a group of public works managers in Eastern Ontario. 17 of them had gone to tender for a snowplow, and only 2 of them had actually received responses, which, as you can imagine, proves to be difficult when one needs to clear snow in the fantastic Canadian weather. So we help with that a little bit. They're not obligated to quote through the program, but I'm yet to see anyone who doesn't. So I'll touch wood on that a little bit. But and you can go out and you could go through the chassis manufacturer, or you could go directly to someone who does a turnkey solution. We really try and have a bit of a broad range of options for everybody. And again, there is no minimum purchases. If you do go out and get quotes from our program, and for whatever reason, it doesn't sit with the municipality, you think you might be able to get better pricing through a local contractor, that's great. We encourage you to do that. Our, compensation doesn't change whether you do or don't buy through our program. There's no bonuses or anything like that attached, because we're partnered with the municipal association. So it's all incredibly transparent. And there's, so you can choose to buy it for your day-to-days, or when you need that fire truck or you need that snowplow, when you start getting up to those multi-$100,000 units, we can cover that as well. From a compliance standpoint, and people often ask me, this is probably what we spend most of our time going through with councils and administration. So we are fully compliant with every regulation in Ontario as far as procurement goes. Within the CFTA, which is the most high-level governing document for all procurement at any government level, there is, in Section 8, there is every outline that you would need to utilize a group buying service like ours, and we're a bit of an advantage because we're a not-for-profit. So we have to post all of our public tenders, and all of that documentation is publicly available at any time. So the only requirement of the municipality is we have a membership form. There's no binding contract with Canoe. There's no binding contract with LAS. Again, it's a as you need to use it program. And then we post all of those tenders all the way across the country. So if we look at the example of fire trucks, if we post a tender for fire apparatus, we award that contract based on the same evaluation criteria that a municipality would use. Our contracts are thousands of pages long, all of the insurance and warranties and all of those kind of administrative burdens that you have to go through when you use that traditional process. We do, and we do it on a not a higher level, but we make sure that all of our T's are crossed and I's are dotted. For lack of a better description, we have an in-house legal team that checks compliance on every single contract that we do. And thankfully, we've never seen the inside of a courtroom or been challenged on any of our procurements. The municipality is required to post in Ontario what's called a notice of intent, which is something that goes out to the public on where you would regularly put your bids and tenders. And it says something to the effect of, the municipality of Lucan Biddulph is going to utilize the LAS buying group or the Canoe Procurement Group of Canada's programs as necessary. And to do that, you're covering your requirements within the CFTA. And you're also notifying the public and the taxpayers that, if they see a shiny new piece of equipment drive down the street and say, well, we didn't see a tender for that, you can rest assured that, through our tendering process, that competitive part of it was already completed. You can go online and see any of our contracts from an evaluation standpoint. So if we have 35 vendors come back on the fire truck example, you can see where they were ranked on that evaluation criteria, how we ranked them, what their scores were out of 1,000. There's no password protection. It's all government forward-facing documentation. So we're a true transparent organization, and there's no secrets or surprises, and we're fully compliant with all of the regulations around municipal procurement in Ontario. Here's a graphic that I like to use for anyone who's viewing through stream or in the room. Here's kind of a breakdown of what your traditional procurement for a municipality would look like in most cases against how our process works. So, it's an 11-step process from identifying your need. We know that this piece of equipment is getting a little rusty and it's costing us a bit more to fix on an annual basis than it is to keep on the road, or downtime is becoming a problem. And then you go through all of these steps to make sure that, you go through your competitive bid process, you go out, you get your prices, you submit your interest. Then you have that cutoff date where you can't interact with the vendor anymore once they've submitted their bid. And we kind of do all that heavy lifting between 3 and 9, which is where all of the administration work comes in. And I'm not sure if your municipality has a procurement specialist or a procurement team. The smaller the municipality, the more you find that it's kind of falls on the plate of whoever has the time to do it that week, or, it might fall on the public works manager, which is, public works managers are expert in public works, but administration and writing tenders might not be their forte. So this kind of protects the municipality as well, because we know all that legislative part of it is being taken care of. But the real benefit here is the time saving. So instead of, in a world where it takes 24 months to get a snowplow, the difference in this process and going through your traditional process could shorten that to, 24 as opposed to 28, or 18 as opposed to 24. So, we're not immune to the supply chain challenges, but just this process alone can really help speed that up. From a program standpoint, I included this in the presentation just as kind of a high level overview. So we have 2 different types of contracts that are available to our membership. The first is Canoe contracts. So we issue those in Canada by us. They're written by our procurement team, our legal team, and they come from the request of our membership. So if we get enough requests from municipalities saying, hey, we would really like, and this is a real world example, we're paying too much for tires. So we go out, we write a tender for tire and availability and access to our 5,000 members, and then we issue national contracts based on an evaluation criteria for our national partners in the tire program. And then the municipality can leverage that pricing based on our 5,000 person membership as opposed to. So that's the first type of contract that we have, is with Canoe. And then the secondary ones, which are on the last page, they're what we call capital purchasing. So they're issued by our United States partner. All of the laws and everything in Canada are fully compliant and met. We post those tenders on their behalf in Canada, and all of the administration within them is looked after by us. So while the evaluation part of it is taken care of by our partners in the US, the compliance piece, the training for the vendors, if you're looking at someone like John Deere or Caterpillar, they have hundreds and hundreds of dealership networks throughout Canada. We make sure that all of their distributors are familiar with how the program works, what the pricing looks like, how to quote appropriately, make sure that they're doing everything on the best behalf of our membership. And then we post those tenders in Canada to make sure that all of the Canadian vendors have a fair shake at any of those products. So if we tender fire trucks, if we have a Canadian fire truck manufacturer who wants to go into that competitive process and get access to that membership, they have full ability to do so. So it's not just a US program, it's all done in co-marketing of those tenders by us. We post those on behalf in every province in the country, so everybody gets a fair shake. So very quickly through some of these are more Canoe-based programs and the day-to-day stuff, just to give you an example of what we can offer. So culverts, excuse me. Culverts is our largest program in the country. We have a national contract with Armtech. In Ontario, it wasn't a huge benefit up until this year because the contract was always with steel. It never included plastics. As of this year, I'm very pleased to result after a lengthy back and forth with our vendor that we have secured plastics in Ontario. So all of the plastics and steel and culverts that you require on an annual basis, we can do. Tires is our second biggest program nationally. That's both service, install, national account-based programs with any of these manufacturers you see on the screen. And we have an additional one, which for some reason hasn't quite popped up on my presentation. Office supplies through Staples. We have one contract with Staples. On a contract like this, your municipality is provided with the login information for the regular Staples website. The only difference is your invoice is going to come from Canoe. And when our invoicing is through the association against from the vendor directly, it's all indicated on our website. It's next day delivery, it's just category-based discounts, and it's all done through the regular Staples website. Auto parts with Napa, so you probably already buy auto parts on a fairly regular basis. Our program is set up to give preferred pricing on category discounts across about 550,000 SKUs, I believe, with Napa, and we can set you up with an account with them. Fleet upfitting, so everything from bolting lights to a truck to law enforcement vehicles to kind of everything in between. Traffic supplies, so all Ontario street signs, any type of construction, rentals, purchases, placemaking signs is something we've done a lot of in the last little while with Ontario municipalities as placemaking becomes a more and more popular program for municipalities around the country and then those digital street signs that you see for speed warnings and all those kind of things through our partner at Traffic Logics. Geospatial equipment, electrical supplies and connectors and all of that good stuff. MRO through Granger Fastenal Motion. So all of your, maintenance, repair and operations equipment that you would need. Again, these are all set up with the vendor. It's category preferred discount pricing all the way from, welding equipment down to fasteners and garbage bags. And then our capital purchasing program, and I know I'm rushing through this, my apologies. Our capital purchasing program. So those are what we call our Sourcewell contracts. And those are those big one-off items that you need kind of on a semi-regular basis. So when you need to buy a new tractor or a new grader, a dump truck, a fire truck, a Zamboni, some of the brands are listed on there to kind of put it in perspective how much business we do. With one of our larger heavy equipment manufacturers, we represent through Canoe about 15% of all of their greater sales worldwide. It's tens and tens of millions of dollars with all of these suppliers. Most of them are very familiar with how the program works, and we offer the discounts. For a piece of heavy equipment, as an example, a general discount is somewhere between 18 and 47% off what the retail price would be, and that all of that tender part of it's already taken care of. Warranties are fully included in any one of our programs. All contracts have to be quoted with a contract number on it, so we know that the municipality is getting what it is that they're bargaining for. And all of our suppliers can be audited at any time to make sure that they're doing the best by our membership. As much as we love our vendor relations, we actually work for the members, not for the vendors. So while we're a benefit to both parties because we're kind of saving them some time and going through that competitive process too, we ultimately work for municipalities, and that's where the bulk of our interest lies. So that's the way that, and I touched on that Sourcewell relationship. And again, you can go and compare contracts in any category without any obligation to purchase. And if you choose to go back to regular tender, that is fully within the bounds of the municipality to do so, because we don't have a contract and you're not entering into a contract with them until you issue a PO. That's about it. Thank you very much for your time. I tried to do that in council presentation speed, which is normally a little quicker than what I would, but I will gladly open the floor up to questions. And if anyone wants to ask, I am more than happy to answer if I can.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much, Simon. We appreciate the presentation. So council, any questions or comments for Simon? Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to make sure I understand. So if I go back to slide 6, that you're talking about the traditional versus cooperative procurement. And I'm just wondering, like being a very small municipality, sometimes we have very, very specific needs. So I guess my question is, so I understand, is that like staff's going to be involved in the entire process? I mean, including that writing the tender? Because I know I've been through a number of these where we've had very specific needs. And I just wonder where staff is involved in this.
Yeah, through you, that's a great question. So municipal staff can be as involved or as uninvolved as they like. There's two different ways we kind of approach. So we do that tendering process based on a category as opposed to a specific piece of equipment. So if we look at heavy equipment, for example, we tender the category of heavy equipment, and then within all of those suppliers, there's a list of what's covered. So if it's, John Deere or Caterpillar, it says, backhoes, graders, articulating loaders. When the municipality has that specific need for their specific piece of equipment, all of those discounts are pre-negotiated down to a model number, and then you build the specification that you require for your, for your purposes would go directly, you interact directly with that vendor and say, right, we need a grader or a backloader or something like that meet these specifications, and then Public Works or whoever it is within the municipality that's going to deal with that vendor, you send that spec directly to them and they quote you through contract pricing based on your need. It's not just we have a bunch of pre-assigned graders sitting in a shed somewhere and we say this is the one you can get. Everything is built custom for what the municipality's needs would be.
All right, good. Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Hodgins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Simon, for the presentation. Very interesting. I have a question about, I think, Canoe Procurement Group and the structure and what exactly it is. Is it a non-for-profit corporation? Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're a wholly owned entity of a municipal association, and we have a partnership with every municipal association across the country, depending on where we are. So our parent office is the RMA, which is the Rural Municipalities of Alberta, which is where Canoe started. And then in each province, as we roll out across the country, we have an individual partnership agreement with each association. So our administration and accounting functions are taken care of out of our head office, and then all of our direct contracts from an invoicing standpoint and that feedback in the municipalities we work with. So we're a wholly owned entity of the RMA with a partnership agreement with every municipal association across the country.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. So is Canoe Procurement Group then, is it governed by like a board of directors or?
Yes, sir.
And that's through the RMA as well?
Yeah, so we have two levels of governance. The second one is kind of a newer one. So we have both so the board of directors for the RMA would be the ultimate where the buck stops, if you want to call it that, from a board of directors and a not-profit governance standpoint. And then we have an advisory council of every member with someone from each of those associations across the country that meet, I think, quarterly to, make sure everything's ticking along nicely and look at those reports and make sure that we're doing the best by our membership. So we kind of have two levels of governance.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, in recent years, I guess, has Canoe been growing a lot? It seems like I'm hearing more and more about it at conferences, and is it maybe more
Exponential. Yeah. So group buying is nothing new, councillor. So it is not a new concept. It's newer in Canada, depending on where in Canada you are. So in Ontario, which, my focus is only Ontario. I don't have any relationship with any of the other provinces outside of being employed by them. But since I began, if revenue is a bit of a gray number in our industry because we don't own the product, right? But if we look at total sales of other people's product that flow through us, we're essentially tripling year over year.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Manders.
Hello. Just one thing, I'm curious on the vendors. I'll use the MRO supplies as an example because was my previous world. The vendors you have there, I think a lot of your vendors, they're on contract for 3 years and then maybe renewable 1 year further. But my question is, do you also in your tendering process show who lost the tender and how you vetted the other people out?
Yes, 100%. So short of going through a demonstration, if you look through any of our contract information, so the pieces of documentation that are publicly facing for every tender we do or that Sourcewell does through Canoe. So there's the opening record, which shows you every single person who submitted a bid, then that evaluation criteria, and you can see the comment and review section from every bidder on that particular tender. So if we use the MRO example, so if we've awarded to say 6, and it might be awarded to 8, including Sourcewell, but we only have made it available for 3 in Canada because they've met the Canadian specifications. Anyone who was denied access to that contract or didn't win wasn't awarded for whatever reason, you can see like the list of everyone who applied and everyone who wasn't awarded and what their evaluation criteria was.
So it's there, very good. And then the other thing, I think it's an interesting to look at, even not too long ago purchases because of inflation, but just again, where purchasing, because we don't have a procurement team. So I'll use Staples as an example. Take last month's bill. Our staff was using the Canoe procurement number for pricing just to see what last month's bill was. And then you call them up and you order the same, probably a lot of repeat orders, whether it be big pens and paper and same historical stuff. And I'm assuming from your presentation, the expectations should be if they weren't using that number, they should see a little bit more favorable pricing. I'm assuming you would, and we would all hope.
I would hope so too. So generally speaking, depending on, unless it's something that's not covered within the contract, and every contract is very clear as to what is covered in that contract. So let's say you bought a box of pens today and it was $5 through the category discount. Let's say our category discount was, maybe it's 12% on pens. I'm really not sure off the top of my head, but it's a bit of a deep dive, but you should recognize a saving against regular purchases if you were to switch over to our program. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. So I'm hoping our staff, anything that'd be just an interesting thing. Cause again, that's something traditional that's probably bought month after month.
Yeah, for sure. And that's again, to kind of my point from earlier, I find the value, especially for the smaller municipalities. It's, when you don't have a procurement team, it's the value is that the administrative help on the other side, but on the day-to-day purchases, it's just something you're already buying, but you're recognizing that cost saving for, the municipality and ultimately for the taxpayer.
For sure. And then even looking at these MRO suppliers, Granger, Fastenal, Motion Industries are all huge. All of them, we get maximum pricing from 3M. Use 8210 as an example that everyone in Ontario through COVID has purchased at an 80 and N95 8210 3M respirator. What would your expectations, again, calling those three vendors for a box of 8210s? Would it be to see the consistent same pricing and considerably better again than buying it locally?
So there's a couple of scenarios that you could analyze against that. So I think during COVID, there were some exceptions made on pricing for municipalities, given the emergency situation of everywhere we were.
Yeah, so I understand that.
Without the exact price of that particular unit, I couldn't say. With our MRO suppliers, the way everything is broken down is a percentage on category discount. If my memory serves me correctly, on Granger, I believe PPE is 22%. So if we were looking at that, or that fell into that category, it would be 22% off what they would sell it. The alternative is, and this is something we do run into from time to time, and again, my favorite thing is telling municipality they're already getting a better deal. So if you have an antiquated contract, or say a grandfathered contract with a auto parts supplier or someone who was on a government deal that doesn't exist anymore, and if for whatever reason it hasn't covered the cost of inflation, or it was SKU specific, which is something that vendors are getting away from a lot. They don't want to say, here's a fixed price for an item because that item's going up, percentages over month over month over month. And inevitably at some point they start to lose money. And it's something that's actually come up more often than not through Canoe programs, but because we have a category discount against the retail price, it protects the vendor from inflation, but it's also extending that same discount to the municipality.
Right, yeah, no, I think it's an interesting program for, again, to checks and balances and current purchasing to looking at this with identical SKUs and items, not like items, but identical items. So yeah, no, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Councillor Westman.
Yeah, regarding large apparatus pricing, like fire trucks, graders, backhoes, things like that. You talked about customizing. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what that would look like, because with our fire departments, we have fire boards and our leadership that would go through the design process to determine what their needs are as far as features and apparatus that they would go with. So how would that look like? Obviously, Canoe would be the one doing the brokering, but would we be dealing directly with the manufacturer to get design information and like component information, things like that? So I'd like to know a bit about that. Thank you,
Councillor. It's a great question. So again, it's kind of there's two different ways to look at it. So if we want to look at when we tender fire apparatus is the name of the contract, and I was working with the municipality this morning to buy a fire truck, so it's pretty fresh in the head. The way it works is, so your specifications on a pumper truck, for example, are probably going to be different to the municipality down the road, whether that be the size of your fire hall and the length of the truck. And we have kind of a go-to, quote unquote wives' tale within the canoe world, where there was a municipality in Manitoba that went through traditional tendering process, and through all of those 18, I've seen fire truck specs, they're somewhere between 35 and 55 pages long, just all the way down to the nut and the bolt. The one thing they forgot to spec was length. And when the shiny new truck arrived, it didn't, and that manufacturer came in at low bid. That truck didn't fit the firehouse, and then they had to spend $112,000 retrofitting it so it would, because it was a lot cheaper than the $700,000 fire unit. When the municipality has a specific set of specifications for their individual needs, I wish that was a joke, that story, but it's true. That individual set of needs, you work directly with the vendor. So the couple of situations, one, you already have that relationship. So if you have a preferred supplier, or your entire fleet of fire vehicles is already through one supplier, and we have that supplier, you can go to them and you can say, hi, John, we need to build a carbon copy of what we had before. The old one's getting a little long in the tooth, and we need to update X specifications. When they submit you back a quote, every part of that piece of apparatus that is covered within the quote is built on that discount. So if the stock standard price for a pumper right now is about $800,000 to $850,000, and if you need a ladder truck, I hope you don't fall off your chair, but it's getting closer to $2.5 to $2.75 million for a ladder truck for fire apparatus. They build that truck, and then they build the discount backwards from the completed specification.
Just on that, building the discount on backwards, based on your specifications, I guess, how does that fall within being an open and transparent tender? Because if you've already essentially awarded the tender on the basic truck, but then you build from there, how is that open and transparent?
We're tendering the category. So it's not specific components, but then within that category, every manufacturer will list what is covered under that process. Fire trucks aren't a great example in that category, because generally every single fire truck is built to spec, and there's not just a lot full of fire trucks running around. That's, if you go to a car dealership and you see 6 Corollas, one's got air conditioning, one doesn't, and it's a different price. If you look at fire trucks, 99% of them, with the exception of very few examples where, one might get returned, but they're all built to spec. So in that circumstance, the category of fire apparatus has been fairly, they're submitting a competitive bid based on the value to the membership. And that includes the warranties and the parts and being built for you. And every manufacturer operates a little bit differently. If we look at something like heavy equipment, so let's say it's a grader, and the base model discount for the LP 650 is 37%, and then they're adding the additional specifications on that. The discount's coming on that base model, and then anything that's not covered within that contract but needs to be applied by the manufacturer would still fall under that open and competitive process, because we've tendered the category, not the specific vehicle. And I don't want to say that's a way of getting around it, because it is a perfectly legitimate way to tender it. Because if we tendered every single model and we said, right, here's fire truck A, and then here's fire truck B, which is the exact same fire truck, but it's got a different hose coupler, and then we would have to write thousands and thousands of tenders, for lack of a better description. So there's no real way to circumnavigate that outside of tendering it by category. And then you have that direct chain of, that's one other good thing about using a GPO when the need suits, is you can have that direct dialogue with the vendor, and you can say, hi, fire truck manufacturer A, we're looking at this with these couplings, this size tank, this level of PSI for the pumper, et cetera, et cetera. Please build me that entire thing under the canoe contract. And there's no kind of, hey, we've gone past that cutoff date where we can't interact with the vendor anymore through your traditional tender process. But we have to tender it by category to answer your question, as opposed to specific models. There might be a base model discount, which is kind of where it starts, and then the retail price of other things would be built on top of that. But when you receive a quote, it's very clearly outlined what is discounted and what is not.
Okay, thanks for that. Did you have anything else, Councillor Westman? Nope. Any other questions or comments before we thank Simon for his time? Jeff, did you have anything that you wanted to add or question?
Madam Mayor, if you don't mind, Simon, Jeff Little, Public Works Manager. One quick question, and again, is when you have the base tender, say like for a grader or backhoe, and for some reason the municipality does not want to take the top tender, do we have the choice to take the second bid on that tender?
That's a good question. So there's two answers. Again, everything I say seems to have two answers. So the first one is going to be what falls within your internal procurement policy. So even though we're tendering a category of equipment, if you come back and let's say you go to 3 of our manufacturers and the one that doesn't come in the cheapest is the one you want, are you able to do that? Yes. It's because we've tendered the category. We've determined that those 3 vendors all bring a benefit, both from a cost saving and, reputation and ability to deliver services, all of those things that we evaluate against as a whole for that category. So you can choose any of those ones. And I'll give you a working example just to kind of put that in perspective. So we had a municipality recently that bought a sewer vacuum truck. I'm not too familiar with what they do, but they're big, large, expensive pieces of equipment. They received 3 demonstrations, 2 from Canoe vendors, 1 from a vendor that was not on Canoe. Fortunately, the non-Canoe vendor was dismissed as just it didn't suit the needs of what they had. And then they went to 2 of our vendors to go through that process. They actually ended up making the purchase on the more expensive unit for a couple of reasons. First one was it was going to arrive 6 months earlier than the other one, and it was still within budget that was originally put forth to council. The second thing is the chassis that it was built on was a unit that their entire public works team was familiar with repairing. They understood how the engine components worked, and it was and quite frankly, they just liked using it more. And they're not in any breach of contract by doing that. And we run into circumstances where a vendor might file and say, hi, we know we were the cheapest. Why didn't they go with us? And we have a legal team that writes a letter pretty quickly and determines why. And, they know that when they go into the contract, so it's not a shock to the vendor as well. If your internal procurement policy, even if you're using a GPO, says you have to get 3 quotes, for example, and then execute on low bid, then you're kind of hamstrung by your internal policy. I did try to take a look at your procurement policy before I joined the meeting tonight, but it's not available online for whatever reason.
Okay. Great, thanks. All right, one last question, one last call for questions. All right, well, thank you very much, Simon. We certainly learned a lot from that, and I think staff's got a lot to think about, and I imagine that you will be hearing from some of them in the future.
Yeah, your team's been great to work with up until this point, so I look forward to it.
Okay, best of luck to you and your wife. Hope all goes well. Congratulations.
Take care. Thank you very much.
Yeah, bye-bye. Okay. All right, moving on to our minutes we have in front of us. The minutes from the special council meeting of January 31st, 2023, and that was our budget meeting, and our regular council meeting minutes of February 7th. If nothing has to be amended, I would ask for a mover and a seconder for approve the minutes as circulated. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan, all in favor, and that's carried. Don't believe that there has been anything changed from the business arising. I think everything is ongoing. Did council want anything added to the business arising list from the sets of minutes that we just approved? Okay, moving on to correspondence. We've received a number of items since the last time we met, but our staff hasn't highlighted any. I didn't know if there were any items that council wanted pulled or to speak to. Okay, seeing none, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder that we receive the correspondence items for information purposes. Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to committee reports, Blue Water.
We had a meeting. It was in person. Unfortunately, I had to take it online while I was traveling. So but it was more an introduction. There's, I believe, 3 or 4 new members to our board. So they had a tour of the facility. And again, just an introduction of what to expect over the next 4 years. So, but nothing new to report. Thank you.
Thank you. CEDC.
We meet tomorrow night. Thank you.
Lake Huron, we meet the beginning of March. Fire boards, there's nothing there, but
I can give a quick update now. We had two submissions for the RFP for the Fire Services Master Plan. So the chair of both boards, fire boards, met last week with both chiefs and myself. We opened them. We are in the process of getting a report to council, and we expect that report to be presented to council at the March 7th meeting.
Thank you. ABCA and Upper Thames, we haven't gotten it, or ABCA, Jaden, I see, I have to remember that you're the new board member.
Yes, so the in the correspondence, there was the meeting minutes from the December 15th meeting attached. And last Thursday was the first meeting of the new term for the ABCA board. And some of the highlights from the last meeting, ABCA is working on the Conservation Authorities Act update, and they have prepared draft cost apportioning agreements for Category 3 programs. So that is, speaking with Ron, that's going to be coming to council for one of the March meetings, and ABCA will join to provide some more information on those cost apportioning agreements. With respect to Bill 23, as of January 1st, 2023, the conservation authorities prohibited from providing advice to municipalities on non-category 1 matters. So a transition plan was recommended by the ABCA staff and endorsed by the board. And this information is available in the February 16th agenda in the upcoming minutes from that meeting. And the last item I wanted to highlight from the meeting was the Canada Nature Fund project for restoration and mitigation for a Sauble River species at risk in Ontario. So there's two main threats identified to the Sauble River species at risk, being nutrient enrichment and sediment deposition. So the goal of this multi-year project is to provide aquatic habitat in the Sauble River for species at risk, freshwater mussels and fishes. So it's working with watershed residents for up to 5 wetland restorations, 17 tree planting sites, and up to 1,200 acres of cover crops. So there's funding available to watershed residents to do some of these projects and improve the watershed natural areas. So there were 2 projects in the township of Lucan Biddulph for tree plantings, and that was Paul Dietrich and Ron Van Giel, who took advantage of that project and some funding to get some trees planted on their properties.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Just thinking about how ABCA is moving forward with Bill 23, it would be good to get a report from Upper Thames once they've confirmed what they're doing, and whether that comes from Dirk or whether Tom can at least send us, because Tom Heeman's our joint representative. But it would be good to get an idea of what Upper Thames is doing. So,
Madam Mayor, on that topic, I believe I did get an email with an attached letter today from the Upper Thames, so I will be reviewing that.
awesome. And that is good news about the tree plantings in our area. And I know we received an email about the partner appreciation event that's coming up too. So that'll be good to attend. Deputy Mayor Dick.
Just gonna let Jason know I'm going to the to buy a ticket for the fundraiser event, so I'll be going to that, just so you know.
Hey, on to Parks and Recreation.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Parks and Rec Committee, as well as the Trail Committee and the CDC, met last Wednesday for a brief policy training and a nice introduction night. It was great to meet all the new volunteers as well as some of the old. Kind of gave us an opportunity to, really stress upon how great it is that they've dedicated their time to volunteer for our community, and allow them to speak to the group about why they've decided to put their hats forward to join up with these committees, and the ones that have been with it a long time, the trials and tribulations they've been through and how much they've enjoyed it. So after that, we did a quick tour of the revitalization project, as we felt it was important for all 3 committees to be knowledgeable about. And it was quite well good feedback came back from all the committees regarding this. So it was a great night. And PrAC will be meeting Thursday at 6 p.m. here in the council chambers.
Okay, great. Thank you. On to our staff reports. Ron.
Madam Mayor, I do not have any.
That was. Well, this was supposed to be our planning meeting, so finance, nothing, planning, public works, Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have one, basically a real quick verbal update. I have been taking or participating in a workshop with a number of representatives from a number of municipalities across Canada. And it's a workshop on asset management for green infrastructure. And just to let council as an update, it really has opened my eyes to how the rest of Canada views their infrastructure. I think Ontario, we are behind considerably on what we view green infrastructure in that. So it you know, eventually we'll be working towards, speaking of that, like the Osable River is an asset. It's an asset that maybe isn't under our control, but it's an asset that that is in our municipality as well as a number of municipalities. So we all have to work together to maintain that asset. Similar, you know, we look at our municipal drains, they are assets. And they're assets globally, they're assets regionally, and they're assets for the people that live near them. And so it's been a really good workshop. Catherine has also sat in on it because it does end up becoming part of the financial aspect of the municipality. And unlike a lot of infrastructure that decreases in value as it ages, a lot of the green infrastructure increases with value as it ages. So it's a very interesting, it's been a very interesting workshop. So
That's great. And sorry, who did you say that was through?
it's put on by an association across Canada that actually deals in. So I'm not familiar with the association, but it was an invite by Dillon Consulting. Actually paid for the municipality to participate. So and like I said, it's got everybody from the Maritimes to BC, a number of municipalities in Ontario like Oxford County is participating. It's great. It's a great workshop. So
Good. Thank you for that. Parks and Recreation.
Thank you through you, Madam Mayor. There's two reports before council tonight, both regarding requests for proposals for operations of amenities within the Lucan Biddulph Community Memorial Center. The first report in front of council this evening is in regards to the operation of a fitness facility inside the newly renovated portion of the community center. This space has been referred to in the past as the Flex Space and was intended with the support of PrAC to be a new fitness space as an alternative to a walking track. The walking track was removed from the project as it was determined to be difficult and too expensive to alter the existing space and allowed for greater success in applying for our ICIP grant by bringing our project under the $10 million range. Staff has discussed the operation of this type of space with our insurance provider, and it is felt that without hiring employees with specific knowledge of fitness operation and equipment, it may be more desirable to seek out a third-party option. In the report, there are a few examples from other municipalities provided to demonstrate how these agreements could look. And it is important to note that these agreements could look differently for our municipality as we are unique in our offering of programs, specifically day camp, which seems to be highly desirable for outside third parties. We feel that putting out a request for proposal can provide an opportunity for local business owners who specialize in this field to present to council and the Parks and Recreation Committee original and creative proposals. It is to be noted, though, if no desirable proposals are received, council could instruct staff to proceed with operations based on advice of our insurance provider or to maintain the space as additional hall for programming or rentals with no defined purpose. And based upon that, it is our recommendation to council to direct staff to issue a request for proposal regarding the operation of this space.
Okay, thanks for that, Paul. Questions or comment on Paul's report from council? Deputy Mayor Mander.
Just maybe it was in there, I just missed it. Just what was, is that going to go out right away? And then what was the length of time it was going to be out?
So staff has drafted up a report should council direct us to do so, and the intent is to have it closed by March 23rd at the latest. This offers us a lot of time to decide before everything's complete.
Okay, any other comments? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of my questions was whether there was a draft RFP available. Not this time. I don't think it was attached to this. So maybe Paul, if you have an idea of what the RFP would look like, or if there is a draft available, could you maybe provide more detail of what that RFP looks like, or how it's structured?
Yep, so there is a draft RFP ready to go should council direct staff to do so, because we wanted to be right on top of this. It's left fairly open-ended and heavily weighted on creativity, because we don't know what that agreement's going to look like, what may come forward. It was heavily noticed when we were comparing to other municipalities that our situation is very different, because a lot of them have joined up with, say, like the YMCA, for example, to mainly deliver programming as opposed to the fitness space, whereas the management agreement is part of the operation of fitness space and programming.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think I would like to have seen the draft RFP, and maybe it would have been good as well. I think if the draft RFP had been or would be presented to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee for review and comment, just to help get that to just to help develop it a little bit more, and then bring that to council. So just a comment there. Do we feel that the size of 2,200 square feet is large enough for a fitness space or a gym?
Yes, so you, depending on the direction of council, this will be discussed at the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee on Thursday, which obviously I didn't want to be presumptuous before having this conversation. And I do feel that the sizing is good, as one of the municipalities that we did speak to who actually operates themselves is about half the size of the space that we are providing.
Okay. And have we engaged directly with YMCA to discuss those partnership opportunities, or would that be essentially done through this RFP process?
So the intention would be through this our request for proposal process that we would be, putting it out. I think it'd be for us, we would be sending it out to the local business owners who are fitness professionals, as well as we know the YMCA has had successful partnerships with neighboring municipalities. So we would put it out, and the idea is to see what the options are. So I think, we wouldn't start a negotiation. Some have just, as the YMCA, you see noted in my report, is a non-for-profit. When they developed their facilities, they went out ahead of time to negotiate with the YMCA, but this was mainly to help offset programming, which they did not offer for the community.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Any other questions for Paul on that? Okay, we do have a recommended motion in front of us, and I would ask for a mover and a seconder. And the recommended motion in front of us is that report number PR-01-2023 be received, and that the Council of Lucan Biddulph direct staff to issue a request for proposal regarding operations of a fitness space at the Lucan Biddulph Community Memorial Center. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. Okay, next one, Paul.
Thank you, through Madam Mayor. The next report in front of council is similar to the previous one just discussed. This report reflects canteen operations at the Lucan Biddulph Community Memorial Center. Over the last few years, staff has noted a trend in municipalities to approach a third-party partner for canteen operations, mostly citing concerns regarding staffing and operating the canteen at a loss. Within the report, council can see that there have been different solutions to this, including providing the space to community groups at no cost as a fundraising tool, third-party contracts that provide a revenue through lease, and some that have chose to operate themselves despite the concerns, so they still provide a service. It is felt that at this time, while construction is completing, releasing an RFP would provide an opportunity for council to hear creative proposals for the operation of the space prior to the start of next hockey season. Some facts to consider that are reflected, my apologies. An external contract for the canteen may have better success through existing supply chains, practices, and maintain more successful service, as well as the expansion of fast food services coming to Lucan Biddulph may decrease the desire or need for food from the community center canteen booth. And council may wish to provide an opportunity for local food vendors to promote local economic growth rather than to compete with them. This is reflected in the Parks and Rec master plan as a positive way to provide these types of services, specifically recommendation number 10. In order to increase community participation and improve cost efficiency, encourage appropriate partnerships with public, not-for-profit and/or private organizations in the provision of delivery of parks and recreation facilities and services. And recommendation number 11, actively seek community and corporate sponsorships to enhance the delivery of recreation programs and services. It is staff's recommendation that releasing a request for proposal regarding the operation of a canteen is the appropriate approach. If no desirable proposals are received, council could direct staff to continue to operate the canteen through the Parks and Rec department. And at that point, a budget amendment with fully proposed budget proposal for canteen operations would be presented at council for consideration. It should be make note too, Councillor Regan did reach out with a few questions. One specifically was whether or not community groups had been approached regarding their interest to run said service. As that is not the recommendation of staff at this point, groups have not been approached, as we feel it'd be better to hear the creative ideas in the community.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Questions or comments on this report? Deputy Mayor Manders.
Just a comment. I really like the idea of this contracting this service out for sure, but seeing if it's possible with somebody reliable. So just a comment.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I also think it's a good idea. It's helpful to see what all the neighboring municipalities have done. So thanks for highlighting that in your report, Paul. It's obviously a common issue that everyone's encountering. So good to look at these examples and best practices and what's worked for others. I like the Lambton Shores option of allowing the Optimist Club to use the canteen service at no charge. And hopefully through this process, we can consider similar models to support local nonprofit organizations within our community. And I think with the RFP going out, I think it would be good just to have some outreach to some of those groups so they can be aware of it. And I guess it'll be interesting to see what proposals do come forward. You know, some might be revenue generating, some might not be, but there's going to be different benefits of the various proposals. So I'm certainly supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Regan.
Madam Mayor, could I just ask just a question? Just for the previous one and this one with the RFP, were we going to take these both to PRAC first to have them looked at? That was mentioned, unless I'm misunderstanding what Councillor Hodgins was asking previously, but I didn't know if we're just going to send them out or we're going to have these reviewed by PRAC first. It was just a question. So, thank you, Ron. Yes.
Certainly with PrAC meeting on Thursday night, that's a great option. I think that's, there's a very good opportunity to do that just as a final, just have another set of eyes to go over those RFPs before they go out. I don't think Paul would have any objections to that. Certainly for the sake of, virtually 2 days, I think that's a good idea.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Then the recommended motion in front of us tonight is that report number PR-02-2023 be received and that council direct staff to issue a request for proposal for canteen operations at the Lucan Biddulph Community Memorial Centre. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Reagan. All in favor? And that's carried. Did you have anything else, Paul?
Just a quick verbal update for council. We met our brand new TSSA, the Technical Safety Standards Authority inspector this past week, and I'm very happy to say that they are incredibly impressed with our proactive approach at safety regarding our ice plant operations over the community center, and a lot of these the safeties and changes that we've made, they came around the same time that we installed the new chiller, because we had also attended a workshop put on by the Ontario Recreational Facility Association and the TSSA regarding the disaster in Fernie, BC. And when your TSSA agent walks into the back room and says, wow, this is an amazing plant, that's great to hear, because they go to a lot of different places, and safety being our number one. And they're also quite happy to hear of our training that we've done with our fire department in regards to ammonia safety. So we've done that with our staff and with our fire department. So I think we've got a really good proactive approach, and it's great to hear from an inspector.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Economic development.
No real reports, just upcoming for the next meeting. Hopefully you'll see some reports on our communication plan and update on the EDC meeting that we'll have tomorrow night.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor comments. Councillor Reagan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have two really quick, well, maybe three really quick things. I noticed that the community guide has come out. I just wanted to compliment folks who worked on it. I'm led to understand that our rec coordinator, Abby Vandermeer, had a huge part in that. So I just wanted to thank her very much, and all the staff that had all the staff that had part of that. And I'll forgive the picture, but that's okay. Secondly, I was at the meeting Paul was talking about with the new members of our committees. And one of the things that I thought was really amazing was the fact of all the new people that were at these meetings and the new volunteers. So I thought that was great to see that. And I met a lot of new ones. We also had an opportunity, like Paul said, to have a tour. And I'm assuming that residents may be able to arrange something, but I think residents may want to take that chance to walk through that just to see what this township has done, because it's a huge sense of pride when you walk through that, especially since we've all been on it since the ground up. And I think it's something that people should take, 20 minutes or whatever it takes just to go through to see the work that we've done there. I just would like to mention that. Thank you.
Any other councillor comments? Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to advise council and staff that through my role as councillor here at the Township of Lucan Biddulph, as of February 9th, I've joined the board of directors at the Ontario Municipal Water Association. The Ontario Municipal Water Association brings together a wide cross-section of expertise to provide direction and leadership on policy, legislative and regulatory issues related to water. The association's oriented towards action aimed at ensuring the best possible safety, quality, reliability, and sustainability of drinking water in Ontario. So I do believe that the Township of Lucan Biddulph is currently a municipal member of the association, which comes with benefits such as training events and other educational material.
Well, that's great. Congratulations, and thanks for taking that on. That's awesome. Any other councillor comments? So I had maybe got two. One's a discussion point, maybe that comes from the procurement presentation that we had earlier this evening. And I just wondered if maybe at some point staff could come back with a report as to how we are going to deal with procurement going forward. Middlesex County has hired a procurement officer that, hopes to expand procurement opportunities with the local municipalities as well. And so I think, I know for my satisfaction, and I guess I would like just a clearer idea of how the staff wants to go forward with procurement and how that's going to happen.
So to answer your question, Madam Mayor, I think we're all interested in seeing how this is going to sort of roll out. You mentioned the fact that there's a new procurement officer hired by the county. So that's something new that we've never had access to before. So that's going to be an interesting process. How can we use them to the best of or to our biggest benefit, I guess you could say. But I'm hoping through our discussions or further discussions with Canoe that we're going to, in order to satisfy, I know Paul has talked about it, I know Jeff and I have talked about it as well. When it comes to things like pickup trucks, I don't have too high expectations that Canoe is going to be able to do better than what we can already do, because our discounts are already pretty good through the the manufacturer discounts. So one of the issues, and I think Simon addressed it earlier in his presentation, was one of our questions was, how do we buy a pickup truck? And I'll just use a pickup truck as an example, from a dealer in Mississauga. And then when we need service, we're not going to drive it all the way back to Mississauga. We're going to go to our local one. That's going to make for an awkward presentation there, because obviously we're not good enough, or they're not good enough to buy one from them, but we'll get a service there. So I think Simon addressed that, saying that if it's a Dodge, for example, they go to the closest Dodge dealer that's nearest us. So I think that's kind of addressed that issue. The one estimate he used for the number of hours that we would spend going through that process might have been more than what we try not to reinvent the wheel here. If we're looking for a grader, the Public Works Association has grader tenders, so we may tweak that a little bit, but we don't reinvent the whole thing. So we don't spend, I would say, there's nowhere close to 50 hours spent on tender. But I would think that unless there's a rule that Canoe, you can't do that, and I don't know why they would say you can't do that. I think senior staff has talked about this, going parallel. So Canoe would give us their price just the same way we would get a price from any other vendor, and we would still do that. And I think that in that process would be able to either prove or disprove that we're getting a great deal. Because, I guess I'm skeptical when I hear things like, 37% off list price for a big piece of equipment. Well, maybe from the list price, but I like to think we never pay lists to begin with, because municipalities always get a preferred rate. So while the savings that Canoe can produce for us may not be 37%, but maybe it's still 10%. And that's what I think we're hoping to see. But I would like a parallel system for the first few times anyway. So until we can get used to their process and how that looks to us and how it looks to our taxpayers.
Yeah, thanks for that. And then the other comment I just had, and maybe this is a question for Paul, or I guess Paul, because this is where it would happen. But I'm just curious why we don't have any events on Family Day. I've seen lots of municipalities offer lots of stuff going on, and public skating and that sort of thing. And I'm just curious why we don't.
Thank you to you, Madam Mayor. I actually had this conversation with staff this morning because I noticed, that was a missed opportunity. In the past, there was often sponsored public skates, or if not, the municipality put them on. And I made note to staff that if there's availability on a day, say Family Day or Easter or something, because we're often open. Pretty much there's only 2 holidays a year where we're not. I'd like to start seeing those offered more, especially since there are often Sundays that are not available because of a junior C game. So I know there's a lot of disappointed families when that happens. So if we can present more opportunities on those holidays, we should. So I think a lot of it's come just after COVID, getting back into the normal routine of how we operated in the past. And I just made emphasis with staff that I'd like to see that start happening again.
Okay, appreciate that. Glad I asked the question. All right, if there aren't any other councillor comments, we'll move on. Don't think there's any changes to budget, any notices of motion. And then we will head into our motions for the night. And the first one is our accounts paid. And the motion in front of us is that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph receive the attached accounts as paid for information as follows. And it's for January 2023, $1,627,953.82. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that's carried. We have 3 bylaws in front of us. And they are bylaw 08-2023, and this is respecting the apportioning of costs for division fences. Bylaw 202-2023 to amend the Lucan Biddulph Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw for Asable Fields Block 13, and bylaw 09-2023 to adopt and confirm all actions and proceedings of the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph. So that if no one cares, and the motion in front of us is that if no one cares to speak to bylaws 08-2023 through 09-2023 inclusive, and bylaw 202-2023 on their first, second, and third reading, that they be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, read a third time and passed. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. And resolved that the council meeting be adjourned at 7:16 p.m. A mover and a seconder, Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor?